Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first invite-only Conservation Happy Hour of 2026. My name is Amy Cutting. I'm the Vice President of Conservation here at Polar Bears International, and I'm really honored to be moderating this conversation today. First of all, thanks everyone for the time, making the time to join us today. There's a lot going on in the world, and we really appreciate you prioritizing polar bears in your day. We also know that the timing doesn't work for everyone, so we will share a recording out after today's webinar for you to share with anyone who wasn't able to make it, and it will go to anyone who registers. So okay, we're going to jump right in. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jeff York, our Vice President of Science and Policy. Elisa McCall, I'm going too fast. There's Jeff. Elisa McCall is our Director of Science. And also joining us today is Kyron McIver, who's our Manager of Churchill Operations. So we'll spend a little bit of time with each of them, reflecting on some of the work that we accomplished with your support in 2025. And also share some plans for key initiatives and things that we're most excited about for 2026. Let's start first with a little bit of Zoom housekeeping, though. We want to make sure this is an interactive event. We'd love to hear your questions. And I know some of you are chatting already with the rest of our team in the background, and it's so exciting to see everyone who's joining us today. But we want to make sure that you're submitting your questions. So if you look at there we go. If you look at your screen, the bar down below, there's a little Q&A button, and you can click on that icon that has the so on some, it's got overlapping speech bubbles or just a little bubble with a question mark. And you can throw any questions you have in there at any time during the broadcast. Folks will be feeding those to me at the right, with some decent timing to make sure we keep the conversation flowing. But if we run out of time and we don't get to everyone's question, we will be sure to follow up with you after the broadcast. So. But for any general comments or just to say hello to the team, you can use the regular chat feature. We love to see who's here and say hello personally and make sure that this is a little more interactive than webinars are sometimes. Okay, we gave people a couple extra minutes to log in, so I think we'll kick it off. And we're going to start with Jeff. I think it goes without saying that 2025 was a tumultuous year. And I think people know that we were very active in the policy realm, but we also stayed very committed to continuing that fundamental long-term research, those priorities that inform the policy work. Can you share what you see as some highlights of that last year?
Sure. So last year we did wrap up our longer-term den monitoring work, maternal den monitoring work on Svalbard, Norway. That was a project that started in Alaska, ran there for over 13 years before we moved it over to Norway and got some good comparative data there. That work has already resulted in one published scientific work, and we're looking at a second paper coming out of that will bring those two projects back together and be more of a comparative. So that project was excellent because it really built some relationships there, strengthened relationships in Norway, and created some new partnerships for us as we went. I'm going to let Kyron talk about BEARDAR a little bit later, and I'm going to move on to kind of the support we do that helps other people do key research around the Arctic. And a big part of that is supporting research, long-term research in Canada, specifically in Hudson Bay. So this is supporting the work of our partners at the University of Alberta, Dr. Andy DeRocher and his team. It's also supporting the work of Environment Climate Change Canada, Dr. Evan Richardson and his team, and then supporting work in the connected Southern Hudson Bay down in Ontario that's conducted largely through the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, but also through partners at York University there. And so that runs the whole gamut of long-term monitoring, capture, coloring, biopsy darting, genetics, that whole shebang. And then just to keep us moving, one of the things we've really leaned into in the last couple of years is our postdocs. And right now we're lucky to have 5 very strong Canadian postdoctoral researchers supported in part, if not wholly, by Polar Bears International. And first amongst those is Dr. Louise Archer. Louise is fully funded by PBI through an OPUS fellowship. We have her for at least 3 years, we hope. And she is doing some amazing work around energetic modeling. Started that work with those robust data sets from the Western Hudson Bay is currently working with partners in Alaska, both USGS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to see how those models stand up in the Chukchi and Southern Beaufort Sea, and then in conversations with our partners in Norway to bring the modeling over to the Barents Sea. So very excited with that. Our next grad student is Dr. Ruth Ripken. Ruth leads our genomics work in very close partnership with the University of Manitoba and Environment Climate Change Canada. Ruth and her team there in the genetics lab at the University of Manitoba have been developing some cool tools and are finally able to answer some interesting questions through those genetic tools about polar bears. We've seen a couple of papers more on the method side in the last year, and we actually have a paper coming out tomorrow led by Ruth there that will kind of sketch out a larger picture of kind of what genomics might do for us in polar bear conservation. So stay tuned to your media and social media channels for that tomorrow. Next up on our postdocs is Dr. Chloe Rodriguez. And Chloe came to us. She's from France, also at the University of Manitoba. She's working in partnership with Dr. Andy DeRocher and folks at the University of Manitoba on feeding ecology issues broadly. So looking at polar bear ice seal questions, but also looking at interrelationships of Arctic fox and polar bear and how polar bear might help sustain Arctic fox populations through scavenging. So Chloe continues to do some very interesting work on the ground there as well. One of our newer postdocs that just started last year is Dr. Brooke Biddlecombe. Brooke's looking at what she's creatively termed kind of the coexistence of tourism and polar bears, which is an interesting way of talking about, disturbance potentially related to polar bear viewing and bear viewing. And so she just launched that project last fall, collecting data from partners in Churchill. We're hoping to potentially expand that to Svalbard data collection as well, and that's an ongoing discussion. And then last but not least, another new postdoc of ours is Dr. Martina Jakovic Palomo. And Martina is working on collecting the traditional ecological knowledge around polar bears and coexisting with polar bears amongst southern Hudson Bay communities in that Ontario region there. And she has been incredibly busy the last, I would say 10 months or so, with no end in sight through at least this fall, in terms of getting out into communities, meeting people, and having those conversations to obtain that data. So that's a rundown of our kind of key science work from 2025.
It looks like you stayed pretty busy. Right. Well, I appreciate that. We definitely hear that people are concerned about whether the science can continue in this environment. And so it's just really great to hear how we're committing to those key scientific priorities and supporting so many scientists, right, in continuing that work in uncertain times. I'm getting a note that we have some raised hands, and it's a little tricky for us to unmute folks. So if you can put those questions in the Q&A, like I said, then those will get funneled to me in the right order. Okay, we are going to move on to Elisa. Oh my gosh, I'm all over the place at the moment. We're going to figure this out. Okay, here we go. I apologize. We are not moving on to Elisa. We are going to talk about how research is just one critical piece of the work that we're doing, but PBI also prioritizes supporting the people who are living alongside polar bears, the people for whom polar bears in your backyard is a real issue, developing tools to help them stay safe and supporting them in bringing these issues to decision makers. What do you see as some of the highlights from 2025's coexistence work and policy work?
Sure. So I'll start off with coexistence. I know Elisa is going to touch on some of our community work there, but on the research side of coexistence, we're doing a couple of interesting things. One is we looked at deterrent rounds, and particularly rounds that impact bears. So think of things like beanbags, rubber batons, even paintballs. So these are hazing and deterrent tools that are widely used on wildlife. A lot of them came from the law enforcement world with people. But interestingly, nobody had ever really looked at, are they safe to use on wildlife and at what distances? And then also things like, does cold weather influence how these things perform or impact? And so we worked with partners in Alberta, a veterinarian and a wildlife biologist, to range test these rounds, these deterrent rounds, and found out that, not surprisingly, the suggested use on the box didn't always line up with the best use. Found out, not surprisingly, that when rubber freezes, it becomes a bullet and is much more dangerous. So you need to keep those rounds warm at all times. And also just learn different characteristics about some of the different rounds so we can provide really good guidance to wildlife managers on the best rounds to use in different situations and on rounds they might want to consider not using at all. A second phase of that started last year too, and this one's kind of fun because it's looking at new deterrents, novel deterrents, and that runs the gamut from looking at new sprays. And so in some countries, pepper spray is illegal. It's considered a weapon. So we want to see, are there other things we can put in a spray can like citronella, peppermint, skunk, that wouldn't be illegal in some of these countries and would give a new tool. So here's a photo of one of those sprays being used on a black bear. That black bear shoots straight up the tree real quick there. And it also asks an interesting question with bear spray that we've wondered about for years is it the spray itself that's effective, or is it the noise, or is it the cloud, or is it all of the above? And so hopefully we'll be able to dig into that a little bit as well. This project, I should have said from the get-go, is a partnership with researchers at Brigham Young University, Dr. Tom Smith, and a grad student, Kyle Garrett, there, who's leading the charge. Kyle is also looking at the use of drones for deterrence and monitoring. We know drones can be disturbing to wildlife, but can they be intentionally disturbing, and how effective might that be? And so Kyle's been able to do testing with drones on both brown bears and polar bears. He did work in northern Ontario and also up in Arviat last year with polar bears and had really good success at showing how effective drones can be at moving bears out of an area safely, so can keep people and bears at a safe distance from each other. Kyle and Tom are also hoping to do some additional testing this year on an electrified fabric. So think of something you could use as a here you go, protecting food that's hanging from a tree, something you could use also to cover a tent, a rain ply, something you could use to cover a skidoo or a quad to keep, you can see the electric is quite effective there, keeping, in this case, a brown bear away from food. Here's a polar bear up in Arviat with some kind of scent in that electrified sack as well. So again, very, very interesting what we might be able to do with this and protecting equipment and things like that. And then the last piece, which we are hoping to do this year, is looking at ultrasonic sound as a possible deterrent. And we know from some limited brown bear work in Alaska that ultrasonic sound can be extremely deterring to bears. We don't fully understand why that is. But again, here we're just trying to expand the toolbox, give people a broader range of things to look at with
Hey,
that.
Jeff, before we move on, can I actually ask you a little bit about that? So you talk about expanding the toolbox, and I think people are familiar with things like bear spray being known to be very useful. And you mentioned it's illegal in Norway, and so that's a really great example of where some people don't have access to the tools in that toolbox. What are the other sort of elements of why do we need so many tools if the problem is the same? It's bears getting into human waste, or getting a reward from food. Why so many different strategies?
Part of it is different things work in different circumstances. It's having options on you. Part of it's legal in terms of what's allowed in different countries, and part of it's just what's available. A lot of these things that we use in the South, like bear spray, are hazmat. So they're difficult to ship to the North. You don't put them on airplanes, at least not airplanes with people in them, there for obvious reasons. So just having some of these things available, even though they're great tools, is challenging in the North. So we're really encouraging folks to look at what's available where they are, and using kind of what's around. And I think a really good example of that's spread around the bear world, both brown bear and polar bear, is the use of handheld flares, because they're widely available. They're temperature safe. Most of them are packaged to be waterproof, so you can store them in a boat or in your skidoo, anything like that. And it's something that's very quick to deploy. Also can be
Well,
used as a signal device, also can be used as a fire starter. So it's like a Swiss Army knife in terms of a rescue tool.
right. Well, and I was thinking about the drones too, in terms of the safety of the operator, right? If somebody can be sitting in their warm pickup truck, controlling this drone to chase a bear away from a food source, it's just such a step in the direction of human safety. And then I know we probably have some of our AAC partners on board, like thinking about animal behavior too, that ability to have this fine scale go away until you hit this point, and then we'll leave you alone, like kind of a little more of a training where it's not this arbitrary noise that might not provide a ton of information for the animal. So some really exciting tools. Okay, well, I'll let you get back. I just had a couple questions about that specifically.
Yeah, no, 100% on the drones. And the nice thing with them too is they're not particularly loud. They're not damaging in terms of the decibels they are. They're more of a visual, scary thing from the sky. And also, you get to see where the bear is. So if you think about
Mhm.
how bears are handled in most parts of the Arctic, Churchill's a great example. We use these deterrent rounds that explode in the air and the bear runs beyond our sight, but we don't know where it went. How far did it
Right.
stop? Did it just lay down over that knoll behind that shrub? The drone gets you up in the air and lets you see exactly what the bear's doing. And again, like you said, it keeps the operator away from the bear, maybe even in the comfort of their vehicle, but at least away from the bear. So you're not kind of wandering out in the dark or across terrain with poor visibility. So it's a very, very interesting tool. And so far, a lot of interest with partners on using that one for those reasons.
Excellent. Thanks.
So just to round out some of our coexistence stuff in 2025, we also did continue our WAPUSC work in Southern Hudson Bay with those communities with some additional training, supplying of equipment like the handheld flares, and like that really nice brand new modern polar bear trap you can see in the picture there as well. Kyron's going to chat a little bit more later about some of our e-fence work up in Churchill, but we continue to work very closely and support the Churchill Bear Smart Working Group efforts that they're doing, like bear-proof bins around town and electric fencing testing in that sense. And then lastly, towards the end of last year, we co-hosted the 7th International Workshop, Human Bear Conflict Workshop in Kalispell, Montana, there, which brings together practitioners across bear species and from around the world. We had folks, I don't even remember the count now, from quite a few countries come and participate there and share information on what's working and what doesn't. And there's quite a lot of similarities across bear species there that we can really all learn from each other. And an exciting bit from that is we raised our hands to fully host the next one in 2028 in Winnipeg.
That'll be a bit of a lift, but it is exciting to bring it to Manitoba.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so that's coexistence, and then we had a couple of policy briefings this year too, because information was just coming at us fast and furious, particularly in the U.S., but in many other parts of the Arctic as well. So maybe you can share a quick summary of some of our policy work this year, how we were engaging with decision makers.
Yeah, I won't delve into some of those more current event things that we've recently touched on, but looking kind of big picture at the work we were doing there, we continued our work with the polar bear range states, and Emily Ringer, who leads that up for us, did her master's looking at the agreement and the current conservation action plan of the range states. So she presented that and those findings to them at their meeting this year, which is pretty cool to be invited to participate at that level there. And so we look forward to continuing that work as we go. We've also expanded our policy team. And way back in the day, it was just me. Now we have Emily who can lead it with some support. And we've added Elisa McCall and we've added Sue Novotny to the team. So we have a really strong team that's half Canadian, half American, still missing some Europeans, but we're getting there on that. But that's allowed us to do a lot more. So this year, we were able to host a group of Canadian senators and one MP at our house in Churchill. And that was through the gracious participation of one of our board members, Andrew Sear, who was able to get up to Churchill. He actually had to fly and take the train to make it up to help co-host this event there. But it was just a tremendous opportunity to speak very directly to government. We had them for 2 hours at the House and really hit home kind of some of the needs around Churchill specifically, with some of the development proposals going on and around waste management quite specifically there. We've also done quite a bit of policy engagement in the US. I want to say we've submitted somewhere around 8 letters to government on that, and 3 science letters to both US and Canadian governments around different issues in the US just last year alone. So definitely busily working on that aspect of our policy work. We became a member, formal member of the IUCN, International Union of the Conservation of Nature. So that's a nice tick there, and we'll be leveraging some of the things that that international organization brings to the table there as well. Emily was able to continue our engagement with the Arctic Circle Assembly and attended that with her other partner, Hilda. You can see in the photo there. And this is a large gathering of people from around the Arctic. And it's an interesting one because it's government and industry and nonprofits all together in the same big room. So it really presents some interesting opportunities for discussions and things we may do in the future. And then lastly, and I'll turn it over, is we continue to support youth and Indigenous participation in Arctic Fora through a number of opportunities. You can see here, I think one of the coolest was sending Dave Daly's son, Wyatt Daly, a brilliant young man in his own right, up to the Arctic Youth Conference there. And he has already leveraged attending that and has been invited back to other meetings. So he is on a roll right now.
Amazing. Okay. Again, I'm going to throw another quick question in there. So in many of these topics, whether it's the community exchange or it's Arctic Circle, waste management comes up. And, I think most people think, well, why aren't they talking about polar bears at these things? Why is it that in these Arctic fora, one of the topics people get most excited about is waste management?
Waste is incredibly difficult everywhere, and even more so in the Arctic. If you think about how most of us deal with waste where we live in the South, it's just out of sight. You kind of find these areas out of town. We create these trash mountains. We cover them with dirt. They're not that visual to most people because they are out of sight, in an out of way place. In the Arctic, there isn't that option to put something away. There is no way. And so the waste is right next to town, and often just on the surface because the Arctic, the soil is either frozen permanently or it's bedrock. And so most places can't bury it. And so they have very few options. And all this becomes, it's already in and of itself, you could say it's an environmental issue, but it's also a wildlife issue broadly. It's a disease transmission issue, especially in the time of climate change and increased disease vectors, because it's an area where a variety of wildlife congregate and intermix. And then it's a huge bear issue because it's massively attracted to bears. They smell this from a great distance. And even though it's garbage and gross to us, they can often find things of caloric value in landfill. And they don't know that some of it's toxic. They don't know that some of it might have diseases, pathogens in them. They don't know that it's dangerous to eat plastics. And so all of those things are not great for polar bears. And then on the conflict side, we know from decades of experience across bear species that once they get a food reward, they become much, much harder to manage.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And, so it seems like we should be supporting communities in handling their bear problems, but sometimes that starts with helping them and addressing their waste problems. And so I thought it was so interesting with the community exchange and other programs we've done where the hot topic is waste management for so many reasons. But okay, well, we'll move on. Thank you, Jeff, very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to move on to Elisa, and I'm going to ask you some of the same questions. And actually, I think you'll have an opportunity to talk more about waste management. So for many years, Elisa has worked both on the outreach and the science teams. And in 2026, you're going to be moving over and focusing more on the science and the coexistence work, which we're excited about for you. A little less excited on the outreach team. But of course, we all work closely together. So can you share what you see as some of the highlights from 2025, wearing your science team hat? Maybe take us a little deeper on some of the coexistence work.
Yeah, so I was going to talk about the community exchange that we did last year. So our first one we did in 2024 in Churchill, and it was so successful that we did another one in 2025 in the summer in Svalbard, Norway. So we brought together Norwegians. We had a climate scientist, a world-renowned climate scientist. We had Arctic safety expert, logistics and operations people, tourism experts, and then we brought Canadians over from Churchill, Manitoba, from the Mushkegowuk Council. So we had some Indigenous representation. Polar Bears International, of course, was there. And we spent some time both in town and then out on a boat together. So we had lots of chances for some really important discussions. And polar bears were definitely the undercurrent of it all, but there's so many things that are related to polar bears or involved with that sort of stuff. And also just like living in the north is so tough that it was really valuable to bring these folks together to talk about different things, like definitely polar bear safety, coexistence, tourism, but also things about, managing infrastructure in the north. And the roads are really hard when there's permafrost thawing and freeze thaw cycles, and there's potholes everywhere. And then like was mentioned, waste management. I know we've already talked about it a good chunk, but it really can't be understated how important waste management in the north is. As Jeff said, like, where do you put your waste? And I think it was really one of the highlights of the entire trip. We spent several days out on a ship going along the coast of Svalbard. We saw polar bears in the distance, but this waste management facility in Longyearbyen was the highlight for many participants because it truly is state of the art, and Svalbard treats waste like its core safety infrastructure. It's really important there. So it was really neat to spend time together to talk to these folks that work here and kind of manage the waste and how that might relate to polar bears. So it was such a valuable trip. Of course, we did talk about things like deterrence. I think Jeff already mentioned bear spray is illegal in Norway. What are other options? There's different viewing distances in different countries. The Arctic is vast, and there are many different communities with many different pressures and resources. And so what does this changing landscape look like for them? We know polar bears will continue to spend more time on land in more places. Shipping will continue to increase. Tourism to the Arctic is likely to continue to increase. So what does this look like? How can we keep people safe and polar bears safe? And how can Polar Bears International keep playing this important role in bringing people together? It's really one of our greatest strengths. So some of the outcomes of this meeting, there were kind of 5 main ones. Number one was, shocker, waste management is a core coexistence tool. So that really is a huge thing we'll take forward. And with all communities we work with, that is a thread. We know that education and training need to be tailored to communities and also expanded. And when there are opportunities, there will be some different safety messaging in some places, but also making sure we kind of have a foundation of safety messaging when it comes to polar bears and polar bear safety. We know that deterrence and response capacity require access and training, and that's something, again, Polar Bears International can really help with. We can help provide trainers. We can pay for that sort of thing. We can get people into communities to train officers, locals, how to deter polar bears. We can provide a lot of support there. We know we need policy. We know that governance, regulation, and coordination will really shape the sort of outcomes we have for polar bears and, again, for people, important things. And then we know tourism is going to require effective management, and tourism can be a real positive. We really believe that. Polar Bears International, particularly in Churchill and Svalbard, we have these interpretive spaces. We welcome tourists. We love speaking to people around the world. When tourism is done right, we can really inspire people. that love polar bears. They can come see the polar bears. They can go home and take these stories with them. They can do a lot from home for polar bears. But we also know that when tourism is not managed properly, it can be detrimental to polar bears and to the ecology of the space. So really committed to continuing to work in that realm as well. So we'll keep the threads going. There was already some great outcomes and forward progress from that meeting. Also just great connections. And we don't have to be the middle of all these connections. We had people, meet each other, and they have their own relationships now, which is exactly what we want. And we will plan for our next community exchange to be in 2027. And we're aiming for Northern Ontario to bring more of those Northern Ontario communities together. We'll bring some Norwegians back and continue to expand this work. We think it's really important.
That's great. Thanks. And thanks for banging the drum of waste management.
Oh, yeah.
I just find it fascinating. I really do. I appreciate that. Well, and I love the idea of this convening, right? I think too often the idea is that we, conservation organizations should be out going around telling people what to do. And I think, our vision is that we bring them together and give them opportunities to share with one another these different strategies and to learn from that and create their own unique plans and programs with us supporting. So I think those exchanges have been incredibly successful, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Okay, we're going to come back to you on outreach, but before we do that, let's pivot to Kyron, and let's hear some highlights from the field operations side this past year. So Kyron, what do you see as some key accomplishments from this past year that the folks listening today helped make possible?
Sure. There's lots there to talk about. We had a really busy year, a really fantastic year, and I've got some good things that we'll touch on here. We continued to do our work on BEARDAR, and so that's a radar project that we've been working on for I think probably 7+ years now. And we've had different iterations of it, and we've trialed it in different situations and in different environments. And so basically, it's a radar system that's we're training it to detect polar bears. Once the radar identifies a polar bear, it could control a pan tilt zoom camera and then track the bear. And we could also set it up to notify people that there may be a bear in an area. So kind of a real handy safety tool that can work in all sorts of applications, like a landfill, or other northern communities or different places like that. So we took our system that we had been training in Churchill and moved it way up in the north in the Canadian Arctic to a place called Eureka. There's a weather station there at about 80 degrees north latitude on Ellesmere Island. And so myself and another colleague took the equipment there and installed it at their weather station, which is a great opportunity for us to do some more field testing in a real world application. In a remote environment with harsh conditions. So far, so good. It's been performing really well. And for the most part, we've been seeing a lot of wolves, which they are also concerned about. And so the radar has been actively detecting wolves. And at the moment, for an alert system, we've got a light installed. And so anybody who's on the ground working in the vicinity, if there's an animal detected by the radar, then that activates the light and notifies anybody who's outside that there may be, an animal in the area. So it's a really cool system. I think everybody's excited to continue to refine it and get the most out of it that we can. And then moving on, we have our EV Tundra Buggy One. And so that's one of the most exciting milestones, I think, of the year. And, speaking for myself, I was quite excited. I was up and down, snooping around the train yard in Churchill before the sun came up, looking for Buggy One when it first arrived in town, and sleeping in it before it made it out in the field. So I was pretty pumped to get the buggy up there, and it turned out beautifully. I think we all knew it would with the team that we had, putting it together. But it was really impressive when the buggy did arrive in Churchill. And so this one, compared to the old buggy, which was powered by a diesel engine, this one's entirely electric. So we've got roughly 2,000 pounds of lithium battery installed on the underside of the buggy. And that's what's allowing us to, performer operations out there. So that's, driving, looking for bears in buggy land, getting bears on our live cameras, which are streamed on expo.org. And then a lot of our education and outreach that takes place from inside the buggy is now all on this beautiful EV buggy. So I think the excitement in general is shared by the whole team. And what was kind of nice is obviously we had years of experience with the old buggy. And so we took a lot of what we liked from the old buggy, applied it to the new one. So there's plenty of similarities, but just everything's kind of refreshed and new and updated. And there's a little more capacity on board. So we have the ability to bring more guests and scientists and researchers, which is also very exciting. And then also we had a new beluga boat. So that was another kind of big change for us. And another really exciting one. This boat was a major upgrade for us. It's a 25-foot Hughes craft. It's got an enclosed cabin. Again, there's a little more capacity on this boat. So I think it's going to open the door to some new possibilities in the future. Hosting researchers like we normally do and bringing guests on board and members of the community. So I think we'll continue doing that like we always have. And I'd say this one is much more safe overall. So safety is always a big concern when you're working in the Arctic, and improvements like this, go a long way. And I think it's good peace of mind when you've got sound equipment to work with. And then just, shout out to Explorer. Usually these things sometimes come up and we've got lots of work to do on them before we can get the season going. And the boat was set up basically ready to hit the water. So that was really exciting. And, as we continue to kind of refine our systems, things just get easier and easier as tech improves and things like that. And so this new boat's a really great example. It's basically just plug and play. And it's been working out really well for us. So this will be our second season with the boat upcoming here starting in July. And I'm very excited to see the belugas return and to getting back out on the water.
That's great, Kyron. Thank you for that. A lot of upgrades to our equipment going into our storytelling side of the house. That's very cool. It's nice to see us being able to keep folks safe and bring, like you say, bring out more researchers into the field to see the animals in person. That's amazing. Okay, well, we're going to go back over to Elisa, because that's a great segue into sort of the storytelling aspect of the work. The live cams in partnership with Explore.org are one of the most notable things that we do, I think, in terms of reach and whatnot. But we know that to make a real impact, right, in addressing greenhouse gas emissions that are melting the sea ice, we need to engage a global audience in the solution. So EV Tundra Buggy One and the live cams are a big part of that. Elisa, you've played a pivotal role in our conservation outreach programs for many years. What really stands out to you about 2025?
I think for me, it's how the global attention to our research continues to grow. We think we've had a great year, and then the next year is even greater, and then it's even greater. It's really been phenomenal. And I think it speaks to the quality of work we're doing, to the collaborations that we have, and just that we're seen as this trusted voice. And that's so important to us. Maybe at the core of much of what we do is being trusted, making sure we have the science right and we're speaking about it carefully and clearly, and it's working. So we had, over 4,000 articles in 2025 in major outlets, and that was up from 1,900 the year before. So that's huge growth. Also, on our more education and outreach side of things, we reached almost 10 million people this year with talking about polar bears and climate change and celebrating this amazing species. And by reaching people all around the world in that way, we really feel like we can make a big impact. Reaching classrooms, talking to especially classrooms across the north is one of our favorite things to do. The kids that really live with polar bears, but also talking to Australians, all over the world. It's really neat. And I think a really fun part of 2025 also was, of course, getting that EV Tundra Buggy One was amazing. And it offered us new opportunities for outreach, including some new partnerships, which included us working with Snow Bear. So Aaron Blaze, the animator of Snow Bear, he's an ex-Disney animator. He joined us for Polar Bear Week, and he drew polar bears live while watching polar bears. And it was absolutely absolutely incredible to kind of bring the art side into the science piece, and in that way really tell the most amazing stories. And Aaron was absolutely the best out there. He and his producer Nick were so fun. They also were really committed to giving back to Churchill, which we so appreciated. So they donated a bunch of Wacom tablets, so drawing tablets, to the school. They went to the school, spent a whole day there drawing polar bears for all the different kids, animating polar bears with the kids, having kids use their own voices and animations, which I think a lot of those kids made core memories that day. And then we also screened Snow Bear at the theater for free in Churchill. Everyone got free popcorn, and we had well over 100, almost 200 people came, which is a very big deal for a Churchill theater showing. So just so many fun things every year. Seems to get better and better out there.
Amazing. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the partnerships, right? Sometimes I have people say to me, how many full-time staff do you have? And I think it's 23 now. They're sort of stunned that an organization of our size has this reach. And it's truly all through these partnerships and collaborations and creativity and leveraging folks' reach who are excited about what we do. So really cool examples. I know sometimes I agree with you. Some years you're like, wow, those are great numbers. They can't possibly go up. And then they go up. It's a little wild. So, I know that a lot of folks in our audience today are helping amplify these messages through their own channels. So I just want to take a second to say thank you for that. We know that our Arctic Ambassador Center partners and photography partners and other folks are constantly pushing out the polar bear story, and we couldn't do the work without you. That's how we can continue to activate, a large number of people to insist on climate action from decision makers. So, well, those are great examples. Are there other initiatives you think are helping us amplify our voice and achieve our mission in the outreach space?
Absolutely. We're doing so many things. A few of the big ones are we just continue to invest in growing our educator network. And last year we added 2 new Canadian partnerships to the different types of education groups who we work with. So that's always wonderful. We also have really leaned into guide outreach. So there are guides that work across the Arctic that might really be seeking up-to-date scientific information or want more of a dialogue or more, just more good information about polar bears that they can trust. Again, that trusted source. So we are doing webinars a couple times a year. We created an Arctic guidebook, a living Arctic guidebook, so we can keep updating it so that it is always up to date. We can add new science and really just be open to guides reaching out to us. So already 600 guides are receiving our quarterly newsletter, which is incredible. And again, this might be Canadian, it might be European, all across the North, which is really exciting. And then we did also add 2 new European Arctic Ambassador Centers. So zoos across Europe, one in Finland and one in France. So another wonderful way to reach new audiences with the polar bear message. That was very exciting. And then something that will always, I think, remain near and dear to our heart is youth mentorship. And so that remains a priority, especially going into this year. We are continuing to do our free summer camp for Churchill kids. We just did our free winter camp for Churchill kids just a few weeks ago. Always a great success, lots of fun. And then working with the Loran Scholar program in Canada is wonderful. This will be our 3rd year. Our last 2 Loran Scholars were phenomenal. I tell you, when we see the resumes of these young students, these university students, all of us kind of think like, what were we doing when we were that age? This is wild. These students are incredible. And we've just hired our 3rd student for this year. So just really excited to work with these young people who are so passionate and have the most incredible skills. We'll just continue working with young people, and they'll help us amplify our message well into the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, we talk all the time about how to sort of engage the next generation, and I'll be excited to be sharing next year this time what we've been working on, because we have a few things in the works. But before we take, I want to keep moving so we have time to take some questions. What are you most excited about as you look forward at 2026?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I think for me, the main thing is having shifted a little bit more over to the science side. I'm excited about all the new science projects we're able to bring on, working more closely with Jeff, more policy, building out our strategic plan, the new one that we're working on right now, developing a roadmap for what the next 5 years look like is actually pretty exciting, especially when the next 5 years, who knows what's going to happen, but we'll have a plan and we're going to do great. I'm looking forward to that. And also just the EV Tundra Buggy One, the opportunities that gives us to be creative out on the tundra are pretty exciting. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Yes, what might happen this year? Hard to say. Could be anything. All right. Well, Jeff, same question to you. What do you find most exciting as we launch into 2026 here?
Well, I'm pretty jazzed to continue our deterrence testing work in partnership with BYU, looking at that ultrasonic tool, seeing if we can get some better tests on some of those sprays, particularly with polar bears, will be great. Just expanding partners in general and doing that right now largely with our postdocs. Our postdocs are absolute rock stars and really can't wait to see where they go next and what they do. And then also excited about kind of next steps with BEARDAR and what we're calling, I think, Bear Vision, which is kind of moving from radar as a tool to detect and identify bears to just video. Our video tools have become so good in recent years, especially coupled with AI, that it's very promising. And so we'll have a few things. Here's an example of that. So this is a camera associated with our radar up in Eureka. These are Arctic wolves coming up into the weather station, but the box is just video identification. It's an AI tool saying, hey, there's something out there. And in this case, it uses out of the box programming. So it's calling wolf sheep. But you would just fine tune it for where you're using it there, but it's very promising. We hope to start testing this in Norway, up in Churchill, and with captive partners for polar bears to refine those models starting this year. And we do have one more radar unit, and we are in discussions right now to try to get that set up in a new place for us, which would be Newfoundland, Labrador, up in the Torngat Mountains, and working with a couple of new partners up there, including folks from the Nunavut government. So stay tuned. On the policy side, boy, I wish I could say we could look forward to a year that was quiet, but we know that's not going to be the case. Between the current U.S. administration and some of the challenges from that side of the world, to some of the reactions to some of those decisions and actions by other countries, and that specifically ties into the Churchill Port Plus project and some of the things happening in Canada and likely in some of our other allied countries there amongst the range states. So we will have plenty to keep our eyes on the policy side as we work closely with partners at all levels of government.
Indeed, and we'll be busy, I'm sure. Okay, Kyron, how about you on the field operations side? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is going back to our coexistence efforts and diving into some of that a little bit more. We recently had the opportunity to update and do some repairs on an existing electric fence at the landfill site just outside of Churchill after we experienced a fire which wiped out the old transfer station. And so after working on the fence, we saw it as an opportunity to also observe the area and see how the bears behaved around the fence. We already had a good idea that the fence, an electric fence, is a really effective deterrent against polar bears. And so having a chance to monitor and see how they responded, which also then allowed us to adapt the fence specific to the polar bears because they are really intelligent and there's quite the motivation there at the landfill. So I'm pretty excited to kind of continue to work on that and refine that some more in the coming year. And then just, our other a lot of what Jeff had mentioned, some of the different deterrents and the camera AI system and those types of things. I think it's all really great. Anything to do with coexistence right now, I'm all about it. And I think the big thing, is education. And so taking what we're learning here and then making that information available to others in other communities that are dealing with some of the same issues. So super excited for coexistence.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate all your hard work on that fence. It was great to see that the bears did not make it in this year and did not have to be hazed out at the end. Albert showed a video there of the bear really pushing on that cyclone fence and trying to get in when the electric fence wasn't operating. They can push their way through, and so keeping that operating all through the season this year really made a huge difference, and we saw a lot of reactions from the bears in the direction we wanted to see, where they took off. Okay, so we've shared some examples of our work. Real quick before we pivot to questions, Elise, I'm wondering if you can just share with folks, like, how can our supporters listening today get involved in this work? We get a lot of requests. How can I help? What can I do? And obviously, there's tons of support in this community financially and through partnerships and expanding our reach. But, what are some of the things people can do?
Right. Yeah. And first of all, just want to thank everyone for being here today. It's many of you have helped us get to where we are today. And it's support like yours and interest in things like this that really help move our work forward. So big thank you. People can definitely consider becoming an individual donor or joining our Polar Bear Patron monthly donor program. I'm a Polar Bear patron myself. You could consider engaging your company in employee matching funds or even in a corporate sponsorship. I know if anyone's interested in that, we've got our wonderful staff would love to talk to you about that. But also just keep talking about your love of polar bears, your friends and family. Tell them about how cool polar bears are. Talk about climate change. Vote up and down every election you can. Vote for leaders who care. And then just look for ways to keep getting involved in your community and making these important connections. That's really what's going to get us through and push these things forward. So we really appreciate everyone's time here today.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, let's get to a couple questions. We're running out of time here. So one of the questions that I have, and this is probably for Jeff, is are you continuing to pursue Burr on Fur? It seems like a good tool for work with brown bears and different kinds of species. Can you give us an update on Burr on Fur?
Sure. So Burr on Fur was as successful as we had hoped in terms of the work we had done, and it's been spun off to a private company now. And so it's kind of open for use by biologists out there, any species, and we'll kind of see where it goes. And interestingly, we had a supporter who in their real life is an engineer who works in technology contact us recently and wanting to help. And his offer of helping is that he works with the largest chip manufacturers in the world, companies like NVIDIA. And so he said, what are your tech kind of challenges in the wildlife world? And so one of them we sent to him was remote attachment of tags. That's something that'd be really useful. And so that could be a next step for those sorts of tags, is finding a way to apply them without actually catching the animal. But anyway, we gave him a pretty good list of tech projects for those engineers to think about. We'll see what happens.
Excellent. Yeah, again, partnerships, right? There's people who do this stuff and know a lot more than we do and have access to infrastructure and technology. It's very exciting. And that was a connection that was made. That was someone who traveled with us on one of our trips up in Churchill with Frontiers North, our conservation journey. And that was pretty cool that we made that connection. So excellent. All right, we have another question here about, I'm going to be using a piece of polar bear pelt for education purposes. And we all know that polar bear skin is black, but on this particular piece, it looks brown. And can maybe, Elisa, you can talk about, when we say the fur is black, what is that representing and why might you see some variation if you're looking at different pieces of pelt?
That one myself. Yeah, it's just the tanning process, I believe. And Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when the pelt gets tanned, it does take the black out of the skin. So it is true the skin is black on a polar bear, but you can explain that it looks brown on your piece of pelt. But it is still a great tool. People love touching it. I'm sure you know that. You can talk about the two different layers of fur, that the fur is actually clear, not white, that it traps heat. There's actually some geneticists right now at the University of Memphis, I want to say. Am I saying that right? And they're looking at the origin of why polar bear fur is the way it is. So we should have more to talk about polar bear fur in the coming year or two, which is kind of cool.
Great, thank you. Okay, and this one's a little technical, so I'm going to read it. We had to ask for clarification because it's a little beyond my technical abilities. But Jeff, this one's for you too. So quality tools such as DFMEA introduce a structured approach so that when we are considering the impact of a deterrent, we do not miss any impacts such as temperature, environmental conditions, tool malfunction, methodology of application. In other words, how are we looking at the environmental factors affecting how well a deterrent works? So I know that there's a lot of different deterrent testing going on with our partners, and I'm sure they're considering these factors. But can you talk a little bit about that, how we look at sort of the big picture when we look at selecting the right deterrent tool, using it appropriately? What are the risks?
Sure, and that's one of the reasons we really want a big toolbox for deterrence, because different tools are going to work better under different conditions, under different cultures and in different legal kind of situations there. So one of the first things we did in that vein is we worked together with Brigham Young University again on bear spray and specifically on environmental factors affecting it, because one of the things you heard, especially in the north, was it doesn't work in the north. It's too cold, it's too windy. And so we tested those things, bringing bottles down, I want to say, to -20 C, and then testing it under a variety of controlled wind conditions as well. And in that case, discovered that even at the coldest temperatures we tested, you still got a stream to come out at about 3 meters, which was the average distance that bear spray is used in real life situations. And then also with wind, it would have to be a hurricane before it really affected the spray there. So again, you wouldn't be out, and the bear likely wouldn't be out either in those kind of conditions. And then with the testing I mentioned there again with those rounds, we looked at specifically cold to see how that affected the rounds themselves. And some of the rounds too, if they were frozen, they wouldn't just potentially penetrate. And in that case, the researchers shot these gelatin blocks that are designed for these ballistic tests to kind of simulate a body without having to shoot a body. Some of them would actually fragment on impact. And so then you had shards go out, making them even a bit worse. And so, yeah, testing those environmental factors for these things is really important. And it's why I'm a big fan of the handheld flare. Not much gets in its way.
Right. Okay. So doing it in a very systematic way where you're considering each of those elements in terms of recommending when and how to use those to make sure they're effective and to make sure they're safe for the animal. I think that often is something we overlook when we're in a tough situation. You might not be thinking about the safety of the bear.
I would add that's something we're in discussion with partners at BYU and in Alaska, is looking at specifically what we call the cracker shells. If you've ever been up to Churchill or around bears, this is the most common tool used with bears. It's an exploding shell that's launched with a shotgun. You can also get pin bangers that are launched by a handheld device, but it shoots out basically like a firework that blows up, makes noise. Also does a flash, but those are quite loud. And the question has been for a long time, could we be injuring bear hearing in the short term and potentially more permanently? And looking at the decibel level of those typical shells, the answer is probably yes. And so we need to be a lot more careful, but we need to do some physiological research to really dig into that. And that's on the docket potentially for this year.
Got it. Okay. All right. We have time for one more. Anybody that we did not get to, we will follow up with you individually afterwards. But I think this one is of interest. And maybe, Elisa, you can take it. And if anyone else has a comment. So what are your thoughts about the use of AI as a tool in scientific research and finding solutions for coexistence or even outreach?
God, that's a good question. I'm going to let Jeff follow up with me too. I think it can be a good tool when it's used responsibly and carefully. I know that at Polar Bears International, we've been having this discussion, and we know other groups are really using AI, and we're not about to let ourselves fall behind. There's some really great applications of it, but we definitely don't want to be using it willy-nilly, and we are aware of its impacts on climate. We have used an AI component for part of our BEARDAR to train that system up, and there might be opportunities in the future that could really propel conservation forward if we use AI in a particular way, but we're not just about to kind of use it willy-nilly, I guess. Jeff, I'll let you also step in. It's an excellent question and a really important one. I'm still wrapping my brain around it myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, Lisa. It definitely has a role. It's a tool. For those of us that are older, if we think about the internet, right? When it first came out, people were like, oh my God, this is going to destroy university education. Everybody has the internet. And it didn't. It definitely has downsides. AI has downsides as well. And it's more about responsible use and deployment, and then really looking at things too, like what does it cost to run AI in the background, right? We know there are also environmental costs, both with energy and water. So just being smart about how we build it and how we deploy it.
Excellent. Yeah, more to come on that topic, right? I mean, it's something I think we're all constantly looking into. We need to be as efficient with our resources as we possibly can. And so there may be some valuable tools, but we need to be very mindful about it. So excellent answers. Okay, I want to be respectful of people's time. We're wrapping up. If we did not get to your question, we will be reaching out to you. I will just put in a little plug if you want to come visit us in the field. We do invite you to join us in Svalbard this summer. We have an incredible 11-day, 10-night Arctic land and sea expedition with our leader and Polar Bears International Ambassador Hilda Falun-Strom and one of our scientists. The trip is limited to only guests to ensure an intimate and impactful experience. Our team will be sharing the link in the chat and in our follow-up email if that is something of interest. So we're grateful to all of you for joining us today and for this community of support. As I hope you know, we could not possibly do this without the incredible support we see from this community, and we are just deeply grateful. We're excited. We're really proud of everything that we were able to accomplish with you in 2025, and excited about the year that we're already roaring into. And we hope to see you soon in one of these events or out in the field. So thanks very much for joining us, and have a great day. Thanks.